My name is Marissa Taylor, and what happened to me on a cold Monday morning last March still feels unreal. I had just arrived at the office barely 15 minutes into sorting files for an upcoming client meeting when the glass door to my office slammed open like a scene from a bad soap opera. Standing there in a designer trench coat and sky-high heels was Savannah Cole, wife of our CEO, self-proclaimed philanthropist, and apparently part-time corporate executioner. She didn't knock. She didn't wait. She just marched in with fire in her eyes and a level of entitlement I'd only ever seen in reality shows. Her voice was sharp enough to slice through glass when she pointed straight at me and said I would be terminated by noon. I blinked, thinking maybe I'd misheard her, but then she launched into a tirade about the gala from the night before. According to her, I had publicly humiliated her by not standing when she passed by my table. That's it. That was the entire offense. I remember standing there frozen, half expecting a hidden camera to pop out and reveal this was some kind of elaborate prank. But no camera ever showed up. Just Savannah, her fury escalating with each word claiming I had disrespected her in front of very important people. She said I had made her look foolish, that her husband would hear about it, and that I could start packing my things. My stomach twisted as her words sank in, and I realized she was completely serious. 3 years of building the company's international division from 2 clients to almost 50. 3 years of working late, missing birthdays, covering for others, and landing deals that helped push the company's global reach into Asia. All of it about to go up in flames because I hadn't sprung out of my chair fast enough when the CEO's wife waltzed by in her evening gown. It felt surreal. Not because I couldn't believe someone like Savannah would react this way, but because the people in power would let her. When she stormed out, leaving the door swinging behind her, I stood there in silence. I looked around my office. The awards on the shelf, the stack of emails I hadn't answered yet, the coffee I never got to sip. Then the panic crept in. Would James, my boss, actually fire me over this? I knew he loved to keep the peace at home, but surely he wouldn't sacrifice a key employee to calm Savannah's bruised ego. Right, I barely had time to gather my thoughts when James walked in. He didn't sit. He didn't make eye contact. He just sighed like someone carrying the weight of the world and said we needed to talk. I knew then it was real. He wasn't even angry. He looked embarrassed, almost ashamed. He said Savannah was upset that she felt slighted and that it was easier if I just stepped away. He used words like optics and tension and domestic pressure. None of it made sense to me. Not emotionally, not professionally. I'd never felt so disposable, like everything I'd built could be erased because someone's pride was louder than the truth. And yet there was a part of me that didn't panic. A small voice whispered, "They have no idea what they're doing." That this wasn't just about me not standing up. This was about something much bigger. Something they didn't know but would soon find out. That voice. It kept me calm, because I knew something Savannah didn't. I knew the secret she'd been hiding, and the storm she thought she had unleashed on me, she had no clue it was heading straight back at her. 6 months before everything blew up, I found myself staring at a spreadsheet that looked more like a slow-motion train wreck than a budget. My student loans weren't just hanging over my head, they were strangling me. Even with a full-time job and a decent salary, the cost of my MBA, especially with the international specialization, was more than I could manage comfortably. I didn't want to pick up just any side gig. I wanted something that aligned with my strengths, something that wouldn't burn me out faster than my main job already was. So I started looking into high-end tutoring platforms, not Craigslist stuff. The kind that catered to ultra-wealthy clients looking for niche skills and demanding absolute discretion. When I stumbled onto one that needed a Mandarin coach for in-home sessions twice a week, I knew it was perfect. Mandarin was my strongest card. I'd spent 2 years in Beijing during grad school, and I'd been using the language in international deals ever since. The catch: the client wanted total privacy. No LinkedIn links, no resume bragging, no personal history that could be traced. That was fine by me. I didn't want this side gig affecting my main career, especially if I ended up teaching someone connected to one of our competitors. So I applied under my maiden name, Marissa Lane. I wore glasses I didn't need, styled my hair differently, and kept my wardrobe strictly business casual. I told myself it was a harmless disguise, but deep down, I knew I was entering a world that didn't mix well with the one I came from. The penthouse, where the lessons took place, was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Floor-to-ceiling windows, imported marble, a private elevator. I'd seen success before, but this wasn't success. This was insulation, a different planet. I remember standing in that living room, waiting for the client to appear, feeling both grateful and wary. Grateful for the chance to earn real money fast. Wary because I knew what these kinds of people were like. Powerful, demanding, often blind to the humanity of the people helping them. Still, I needed the cash. Every time I walked into that building, I told myself the same thing. Just do the job. Don't get involved. Stay invisible. What I didn't know then was that being invisible wouldn't protect me. In fact, it would make me the perfect target. She introduced herself as Savannah. No last name, no handshake, just a curt announcement that I was there to teach her Mandarin and that she needed to sound fluent within 6 months. Her tone wasn't curious or eager. It was demanding, like I was a concierge delivering a bottle of wine she hadn't ordered fast enough. She didn't ask about my background or experience. She didn't even say hello. Just told me to start the lesson and waved me toward a chair like I was a dog who might need instructions on where to sit. Within 10 minutes, it was clear she didn't know a single useful phrase. She confused tones, misread even basic characters, and looked personally offended when I corrected her pronunciation. But what she lacked in skill, she made up for in entitlement. Every session was a tightrope. She'd bark instructions like bring coffee next time, or don't use the front entrance, the doorman shouldn't see the help. I bit my tongue so often, I started to wonder if it would scar. I smiled, nodded, and kept my head down. Not because she deserved it, but because $300 an hour was more than enough to silence my pride for now. There were moments when I almost laughed. Like when she insisted she was naturally good at languages because she'd once ordered dim sum in Chinatown without needing a menu. Or when she claimed that just hearing Mandarin gave her a headache as if the language itself was defective. I kept waiting for her to break character to admit she was overcompensating. But no. Savannah truly believed she was destined to be some international business icon, and I was just the help with a clipboard and too many consonants in my vocabulary. I started keeping mental notes during every session. Not because I planned to use them. Just because I needed a place to put all the disbelief, like the time she said her husband's company would collapse without her ideas, then spent 10 minutes asking me how to say thank you correctly. I wanted to scream. But I didn't. I just took the money, closed my folder, and reminded myself this was temporary. That one day, she'd walk into a room expecting everyone to applaud, and someone would finally say no. I didn't know yet that person would be me. Savannah called it her big moment. A 50 million pitch to Chinese investors that would supposedly prove to everyone she wasn't just a socialite in designer heels. According to her, all she needed was a polished script in Mandarin delivered with confidence and maybe a dramatic hand gesture or two. What she didn't mention was that she didn't understand a single word of it. The first time she attempted to say good morning in Mandarin, it came out sounding like a threat. I tried correcting her tone, but she waved me off and said she didn't need grammar, just flow. So, I did what any desperate tutor would do. I rewrote her entire presentation phonetically, word for word, line by line. I even included bolded reminders to breathe. It was less of a language lesson and more of a theater rehearsal with a script she couldn't improvise. Every session after that felt like coaching an actress who had skipped rehearsal but still expected a standing ovation. She'd recite phrases she couldn't define, ask me what a sentence meant after repeating it for weeks, and get annoyed when I corrected her stress on certain syllables. I'd say things like, in this context the word means logistics, and she'd roll her eyes and ask if we could just say shipping. She wasn't interested in meaning. She was chasing Ian Mage. At first I thought it was harmless. Silly, yes. A little tragic, sure. But not dangerous. Then she started talking about how this presentation would launch her as the company's next major face. How investors would line up to work with her because she'd be seen as globally fluent. That's when I realized the stakes were bigger than she understood. This wasn't just a vanity project. It was a lie packaged in satin and heels ready to be sold to people who expected substance. Still, I kept coaching her. I created multiple versions of the script in case she lost her place. I drilled pronunciation like we were prepping for Broadway. And every time she nailed a phrase she didn't understand, she smiled like she'd conquered the language. I didn't know whether to be impressed by her confidence or terrified by her delusion. I just kept thinking, if anyone asked her a single unscripted question, the whole illusion would collapse. And the worst part, she truly believed it never would. The charity gala was supposed to be just another work event. I'd attended plenty over the years, shaking hands, sipping wine, and making polite small talk under chandeliers that probably cost more than my car. But that night, the moment I walked into the ballroom and saw her across the room, everything shifted. Savannah was glowing in a silver dress, surrounded by people who hung on her every word. I recognized her laugh before I even saw her face. She was holding court at one of the front tables, gesturing grandly as she dropped Mandarin phrases like confetti. I stood frozen near the edge of the room, watching her show off with lines we'd practiced over and over. Lines she still didn't understand. She was performing, and from the applause around her, she was killing it. No one knew she was just parroting sounds. No one knew I'd been the one behind the curtain. My stomach twisted. The company I worked for was one of the sponsors of the event. Our team had a reserved table not far from hers. I'd taken care to look different that night. No glasses, a sleek black dress hair pinned up. I was counting on that difference to protect me to keep her from connecting the dots. I told myself we'd never cross paths in a room so crowded. But fate had other plans. As I made my way back to the table after stepping away, I spotted her moving in my direction. She wasn't looking at me just walking past to greet someone nearby. I panicked. I dropped into my seat, eyes on my dessert plate, willing her not to notice. That might have worked if someone across the table hadn't called my name, my real name. I looked up instinctively, responding, and in that split second, our eyes met. 2 seconds. That's all it was. Her gaze flickered with something like recognition, but it passed too quickly to land. She kept walking. I thought I'd gotten away with it. I thought I could go back to my cheesecake and finish the evening unnoticed. But that look, that flash of almost, would come back to haunt me. Because while she couldn't place my face, she filled in the blanks with her own story. And by morning, that story would cost me everything. James didn't even sit down. He just stood in the doorway of my office like the bad news was too heavy to carry inside. His face was pale, drawn tight around the eyes, and he kept rubbing his wedding ring like it might help him find the right words. I already knew what he was going to say. The moment Savannah left in a huff earlier that morning, I knew the outcome was sealed. He said he was sorry, that this wasn't about me or my performance. He used phrases like unfortunate situation and personal fallout, and then he delivered the line that made my chest cave in. It's just easier this way. Easier for him, maybe. Easier for his wife's ego. But not for me. For me, it was a gut punch that didn't stop hurting because I'd earned my place in this company, with grit and late nights and deals no one else could land. I asked him if he seriously believed I'd insulted his wife on purpose. He didn't answer that directly. Just said it didn't matter anymore because Savannah felt humiliated and she wouldn't let it go. So to keep the peace at home, they were cutting me loose. After everything I'd done, after years of delivering results, they have built their international presence from a small side project to a major revenue stream. All that loyalty, all that work, reduced to a sacrifice in the name of domestic harmony. I sat there trying not to cry, trying not to scream. Anger sat hot in my throat, but I swallowed it. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. He offered a generous severance, glowing references, and anything to smooth the landing. I almost laughed, as if any of that would make up for the fact that my career was being wrecked over something so stupid, over 2 seconds at a gala. Over a woman who couldn't even recognize the person who helped her fake fluency. I could feel everything unraveling. The financial stability I'd clawed my way toward. The reputation I'd guarded so carefully. And beneath it all, a cold, furious clarity started to form. They thought I would go quietly, That I'd disappear with my box of office supplies and pretend it was all just one of those things. But I couldn't. Not this time. Because they didn't know the truth. They didn't know I had been the one coaching Savannah all along. And if they were going to end my career to protect a lie, I was going to end the lie first. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just stood up, walked over to my desk, and opened my laptop. James looked confused, maybe even hopeful that I was accepting the decision gracefully. I clicked into my personal email, pulled up the folder labeled Mandarin Sessions, and selected a batch of video files. I sent them to his inbox without a word. "Check your email." That's all I said. He hesitated, then reached for his phone. 30 seconds later, he was watching his wife stumble through a greeting she still couldn't pronounce after 2 months. Then her voice came through again, asking me to spell everything out phonetically, admitting she didn't understand a word of what she was saying. Another clip showed her bragging about faking fluency, laughing about fooling her friends at the country club. James didn't speak, his jaw clenched tighter with every second. I waited until he looked up at me pale and stunned. Then I took off my glasses, pulled the clip out of my hair, and became someone he hadn't seen before. Marissa Lane. His wife's private Mandarin tutor. The same person who had just been fired for supposedly insulting that same woman. The silence between us buzzed like static. I'm the one who helped her build that presentation. Every word, every phrase, memorized, not understood. She's 3 questions away from public humiliation, and you just fired the only person who could prevent it. His eyes darted back to the screen, then to me, then to the floor. He knew. He knew exactly how bad this could get. Not just for her reputation, for the company, for the investors, for everyone who'd trusted that she was capable. He asked why I hadn't told him sooner. I told him I couldn't. She hired me anonymously under strict privacy terms. I didn't even know she was his wife until the gala. And even then, I planned to keep it quiet, because I'm a professional. But she chose war. She chose to ruin my career over a fantasy. And now the only reason this company might still survive the fallout is that I recorded every session. I picked up my coat, paused at the door. If you want your wife to stand in front of a room full of Chinese executives and tank a $50 million deal, then do nothing. But if you care about protecting the company, you'll remember who was in charge of the real work. Then I walked out, letting the weight of what I'd just done settle in the silence behind me. For the first time all day, I felt powerful. Not because I'd exposed her, but because I'd reminded them who held the truth. And the truth finally was louder than her voice. It was the next morning when the first call came. James's voice was tight-rushed somewhere between desperation and disbelief. The investors had arrived early for lunch. Savannah was locked in the executive restroom panicking. She couldn't handle the casual conversation in Mandarin, and the translator they had on standby wasn't briefed on the presentation. She refused to come out unless someone fixed it, and that someone, he said, had to be me. I listened. Let him stammer through reasons and apologies, most of which came far too late. He said he would reinstate me, full title, full pay. He'd throw in a raise, a promotion, whatever it took. He needed me to save the deal. I could have said no. I wanted to say no. But then he mentioned the layoffs. That if the partnership fell through, half the international division would be cut within a month. People I worked beside. People who had stayed late with me, who'd celebrated closed contracts and pulled all-nighters on tight deadlines. I let the silence stretch before I answered. I'll help, but not for Savannah, and not for you. I'm doing this for the people you were willing to sacrifice right alongside me. If you want me back, it's on my terms. First, I come in as a consultant, temporary with clearly defined boundaries. Second, Savannah has no say over anything related to my role. She doesn't speak to me. She doesn't look at me. Third, we formalize this. In writing. If there's another stunt like yesterday, there are consequences. He agreed without hesitation. That told me everything I needed to know. Not just about the panic, but about the truth he'd been ignoring. He knew this wasn't sustainable. He knew his wife's fantasy was about to implode, and his only hope of saving face was letting the person he had just fired take control. I got dressed without rushing, pulled my hair back. no makeup, black slacks, and a blazer. I didn't need to perform. I just needed to be the one person in that building who still knew what she was doing. When I walked into the lobby, the receptionist's eyes widened like she was seeing a ghost. I headed straight for the conference room. Savannah was pacing inside, still clinging to her printed script, mascara smudged at the corners of her eyes. She froze when she saw me, then turned to James with a hiss of confusion. I didn't wait for the theatrics. I calmly laid my folder on the table and spoke only to him. I'm here to help the company, not her. I'm not fixing her ego. I'm preventing a disaster. And once this is over, I'm gone again. That part was non-negotiable. He nodded, and to his credit, he didn't flinch. Savannah, on the other hand, looked like she'd just swallowed a lemon whole. She knew she had no power left in this situation, and for the first time I saw it in her eyes. Not rage, not arrogance, fear. Because I was no longer just the tutor. I was the only person who could keep her from crashing in public, and I wasn't doing it for her. I was doing it despite her. The conference room was polished to perfection. Fresh floral arrangements flanked the projection screens. Bottles of imported water lined the table, and behind the floor-length windows, the skyline glittered like a promise. Savannah stood at the front, dressed in white, holding her script like a shield. Her voice trembled slightly as she greeted the investors in rehearsed Mandarin, her smile wide but strained. To her credit, she got through the opening without tripping. Her pronunciation had improved. Her tone was confident, almost convincing if you didn't speak the language. The investors nodded politely. They listened with interest, watching her with the practiced patience of seasoned business people. Everything seemed fine until it wasn't. Midway through the presentation, one of the executives asked a simple question. It was in Mandarin, about supply chain flexibility. Savannah blinked. She smiled, then looked down at her notes, as if the answer might be hidden in the margins. The executive repeated the question a little slower this time. Her eyes darted to James, then to me, then back to the table. She tried to answer, but what came out was a mess of sounds that barely resembled Mandarin. You could hear the silence settle. Not judgmental, just cold, empty. I waited 3 beats, let the weight of it land. Then I stood, calmly. Without looking at her, I addressed the question in fluent Mandarin. I explained the logistics model. I cited regional compliance standards. I even referenced past projects we'd run in parallel sectors. The shift in the room was immediate. Eyes turned, pens moved, the mood relaxed. From that moment forward, the questions came to me. Not directly, not rudely, just naturally. They trusted me. I spoke their language not just linguistically, but professionally. Savannah stepped aside without a word. She folded her script and sat down, her hands clenched around the paper like it might still protect her. I didn't look at her. I focused on what mattered, the deal, the dialogue, the opportunity to salvage what she had nearly destroyed. When the meeting ended, one of the executives thanked me personally. She said they appreciated the clarity, the respect, and the knowledge I brought to the table. I nodded, keeping my response humble, but inside I felt a quiet satisfaction. Not revenge, not pride, just the kind of still certainty that comes from being exactly where you belong. As they left, Savannah didn't speak. She didn't thank me. She didn't even meet my eyes. And that was fine, because I wasn't there for her validation. I was there to remind everyone else in that room what real competence looked like, and they saw it, clear as day. 2 weeks after the presentation, I was offered a permanent position. Senior Vice President of International Strategy. Higher than I'd ever aimed, with full autonomy, a budget, and direct access to the board. I accepted without hesitation. Savannah, on the other hand, faded into the background. Her influence disappeared. Her name stopped showing up in emails, and her seat at company events remained empty. I never spoke to her again, but I heard the whispers. She blamed everyone but herself, that she still believed I had sabotaged her moment. Maybe she'll never learn. Maybe people like her never do. But I did. I learned that the loudest voice in the room isn't always the one worth listening to. That real respect can't be demanded, it's earned through work, through honesty, through showing up when it counts. If you've ever been overlooked, pushed aside, or made to feel small by someone louder or flashier, I want you to know this. They might get the spotlight for a while, but substance always lasts longer than spectacle. And when the truth finally steps into the room, it doesn't need to shout. It just needs to be seen.